Good afternoon, councillors, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting. We now have Appendix 3, which is the Perth High School project. Do members have any questions on this report? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. First of all, I'd just like to thank officers for their work they've done in investigating the viability of using passive house standard building techniques for 3 of the projects that are before us this afternoon. For all of us, COVID-19 has highlighted how viruses are transmitted and the importance of providing safe learning environments for all our children, teachers and other staff within our schools. While we all hope that COVID-19 will not be an issue by the time Perth High School is built, can I ask what benefit the passive house standards bring to keeping our children safe from airborne viruses as compared to traditional build schools by use of the controlled air system? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Stephen Crawford, are you here to answer this question?
Yes, Deputy Provost.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters, it's a good question. The current issue we've got in our schools is they don't have the mechanical ventilation, so hence we are opening the windows to create to limit the transmission of airborne viruses. The passive house approach is a design focused on reducing thermal energy consumption, so it's a sealed envelope. And included within that, you have a mechanical ventilation and heat recovery strategy. So within the buildings, the ventilation is a forced mechanical system with filters. And that direct question you asked me, I've asked of my engineers, and they're very positive of the passive house approach to dealing with the current COVID issue or any similar issue in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I noticed that in section 4 of this report that there is no options present. The options presented do not include any COVID-19 impact costs. However, my question really is about the operational impact and therefore the design and build, or the impact, the design and build of the new school from the lessons we've learned over the past few months. Perth High School is my ward, and I know that, like all schools, they've faced and responded to significant challenges, particularly around how teaching and learning is delivered in the schools. And so I would like some assurance from officers that as we progress with the design and build, that the new ways of delivering teaching, whether it be blended teaching, remote learning, or whatever, is incorporated into the design and build specification.
If I
yes, please, Stephen.
If I could add, sorry, Councillor McCall. All construction projects have a construction health and safety plan that is signed up. And the key person part of that is the head teacher. So we have to, in the redevelopment of Perth High School, the key stakeholder, certainly in a tandem build such as this, is working with the school and making sure that the construction activity are blended with harmoniously and to minimise risk to contractors, public and pupils and staff alike during the construction delivery.
I'm sorry, maybe my question wasn't clear. If I may ask a supplementary then, Deputy Provost?
Yes.
My question really was in relation to the use of technology and being technology enabled. We know that Perth Kinross can deliver a first class school because we've already done it with Bertha Park with full technology enablement. And as this pandemic progresses, but also as people become more used to new ways of learning and delivering teaching, then it's very likely that further technology developments will emerge as time goes on. So therefore my assurance is really less around the health and safety aspect, but more about the capability of the school to deliver teaching using technology and educational tools in such a way that it is both in response and lessons learned from the current COVID pandemic, but also that there is enough flexibility and adaptability built into the design and build specification that enables any quick response or any response to new technology developments being delivered in a timely and cost-effective way. because after all, it's more effective to do, or more cost effective to build in the options for change rather than retrofit afterwards.
Thank you. Greg, I think you'd like to add something to the answer.
Yes, Deputy Provost. Yeah, Councillor McCall. Yes, it's wireless throughout the building. It's going to be very kind of open kind of plan and space plazas, so it will give maximum flexibility for the curriculum and for the school.
Thank you.
So there's nothing changed since the start of this pandemic. That's what I'm trying to get at, because I don't see anything in this paper that says we've learned lessons from the pandemic and how we've delivered teaching in that instance. So I feel this is just what we were doing already in the first place, but we're not really responding to the lessons learned from this situation we've been in for the past 6 months.
I think Sheena Devlin would like to add something to this. Sheena?
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and Councillor McCall, you raise a really important point. What we have been doing since March, over the last 6 and a bit months now, have been looking at what has worked well and what circumstances have, placed us in a position to be able to best support, whether it be a blended learning or with some time in school and some time at home, or whether that be the situation that we hope that we don't get into again, with everybody at home and learning from home. So we do have a project underway with Bertha Park High School and UHI, who are undertaking some research into the digitally enabled approaches to learning and teaching that have been undergoing at Bertha Park High School, and we will be using that kind of information to help inform any future developments. But we're at a very early stage with this paper, and that kind of detail would be specified perhaps as we move from stage 1 into stage 2, if indeed the project goes ahead. But be assured, please, that we are learning lessons from what hasn't worked well, and how we can ensure a more consistent approach across all of our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Like Councillor Waters, I'm really grateful to officers for the inclusion of all of the passive house options. It's about, I've got a couple of questions on that. The first one is in section 2.3, we've got an energy usage column, kilowatt hours per square metre, next to an annual energy cost at 2020 prices. And this actually applies to the following 2 papers as well. The reduction in energy from the existing school to the passive house standard is of the order of 2/3. So why is the cost reduction at 2020 prices only of the order of 1/3? Why is that not pro rata?
Stephen?
Yes, the answer is quite a simple one. The energy cost is made up. The kilowatts that you're seeing are a mixture of electricity and gas. Okay. Gas at the moment is, or electricity at the moment is 5 times the cost per kilowatt hour of gas. So the actual heating of our buildings is relatively cheap at the moment, albeit it has a high carbon factor because it's a fossil fuel.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. And the other question was, again, in general, I suppose, specifically for Perth High School, but because it would be a large building, but for the other couple of projects like this as well, the new builds, what on-site energy generation are we proposing to include, or are we, solar panels, air source heat, ground source heat, that sort of thing?
The passive house solution is air source heat pump. Plus, I'm sure it will have photovoltaics for electricity generation as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. You might have sort of begun to answer this in the previous question, but my question was, how are the additional costs involved in passive house? How will they be offset over the lifetime of the building?
the additional costs of the passive house are far more increased insulation in the building and a real focus on airtightness. Included the additional costs, we've also moved the small heating load to electricity, and with a view to that, over the lifetime of the building will continue to be the energy supply there will be decarbonised. So in the report I've talked about the year one carbon tonnes of 249. I would like to think going forward with more and more cleaner energy being produced, that carbon load from that building will reduce. Ultimately, and again, it's a decision whether, you know, I believe it's been discussed whether there'll be a carbon tax going forward, and that's the one thing that's actually not included in this. That was the one thing. But if you think back to waste, the landfill tax changed the whole direction of investment and how we do things. So at the moment, we're proposing these as additional capital costs, and on the face of it, the financial payback doesn't look very much, but the carbon payback is there. And if you recall, back in December when we presented the interim climate action plan, we are currently we've got a portfolio emitting 12,000 tonnes per year. We're obligated by 2030 to get that to 4,000. So that's a 2/3 reduction in carbon. So I'm looking at major projects and small projects to move us in that direction.
Thank you. Councillor Rebecca.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. It alludes in the papers to, I'm on about the passive house thing again, which I think is really important, and it alludes in the papers to us progressing in the passive house direction in order that, because that's most likely to attract Scottish Government funding. However, I'm just curious to know how committed we are as a council to the passive house route, regardless of whether we get any external funding to support that or not.
I think we're not okay. I was remitted to bring back the learning estate projects with passive house options. The advantage I see, or personally and as a department, we see in passive house, it's a certificated process for quality. There's an identified performance gap with low carbon buildings in design and low carbon buildings in operation. Passive house has an independent certifier at design stage, at construction stage, and critically at post-occupancy stage. And the evidence of completed passive house buildings in England to date has all of them have actually met their original design targets. So personally, I'm looking at this from a range of construction quality initiative, construction quality, but also actually deliver, you know, when we make the capital investment, that will deliver on the outputs. I've got increased confidence in that.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that answer, Stephen.
Chief Executive wishes to comment.
Councillor Rebick, if I may, the passive house design standards, Stephen set out the merits of having that for all buildings across Perth and Kinross into the future. Clearly, it will form part of our proposals around the climate strategy, the Perth and Kinross offer that sits above that, and indeed the investment blueprint. But it will ultimately be a matter for elected members to decide whether or not you want to have passive house standards for all future buildings. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Executive. Thank you.
Councillor McDade.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. So, first question is probably most suitable for Mr. Crawford. It's in relation to, you just mentioned in answer to one of his other questions that we were going to use air source heat pumps to ground source heat pumps, but my understanding is ground source heat pumps are much more efficient and therefore would reduce carbon and energy costs over the lifetime of the building. So I'm just curious about the decision around that. I'm just interested from an environmental point of view. The other question I had is in relation to during the briefing sessions, in answer to a question, the Executive Director mentioned that there is likely to be a wider secondary catchment review at some point, and I'm just wondering if we have a timescale for that.
Okay, if I could.
Stephen, doing the first part of your question.
I'll answer the first question. Yes, we went through an option appraisal, or with the options, and the design teams have come back with the air source heat pump. In answer, I can after this I can circulate that to you, councillor, to see the reasons why we didn't pursue a ground source heat pump solution.
Thank you.
Gina Devlin, are you answering the second part of his question?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillor McDade, you're correct. We did have a discussion about the prospect, the possibility of undertaking a review of catchments of secondary schools. At this point in time, there is no set timescale for that. We would wish to seek some political direction in relation to the scale and scope of that, and there would be a decision taken at a meeting of Lifelong Learning Committee about exactly what would be involved in that, and then thereafter, following on a decision at committee, it would then be for officers to undertake all of the necessary components that are involved in such a consultation. And as you'll appreciate, that kind of process, particularly when it involves any statutory consultations, can sometimes be quite a lengthy one. So there is no set guidelines, timelines as yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. The Perth High School scheme, like a lot of other capital schemes, will be running behind schedule. Could Mr. Crawford maybe let us know what the COVID delay is, as well as any others, and what opportunity will be taken as a result of that delay to look at the design in terms of COVID and any other current developments, such as what we've been referred to before, energy costs and savings. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, the original intention was August 2023. Obviously there was a lockdown, and there are implications for the construction industry and back up in operation. At the moment I couldn't give you a definitive time for completion, because that needs to be agreed with it. Well, the options agreed with the education, and we'll look through. We will look. I mean, getting into the detailed design period, we will look at all options to increase value for money and deliverability through the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I remind councillors please to have the microphones on mute, because there seems to be a lot of background noise of paper shuffling, etc. I see no other questions in the chat box. So with that, can I invite Councillor Lyle to move this part of the report, please?
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'm sure that all of you who have visited the current Perth High School will agree that there is a need, and an urgent need, for a replacement. It is this administration's ambition that all our children are educated in buildings that are fit for purpose and in the best possible condition. As you will recall, the Council originally agreed a budget of 50 million to deliver a new Perth High School. Since then, last year, we as a Council unanimously agreed that we should be leading by example and taking actions to address the climate change emergency. As this project is still in a design stage, this administration is directing officers to pursue a passive house design. The action will come at an additional cost of 8.5 million. However, I believe that this action will demonstrate leadership by the Council in terms of its actions to reduce the impact of climate change by significantly reducing the carbon emissions emitted by the building. Also, if we agree to this change of design specification today, it will give us the opportunity to access further sources of funding support from the government for this project. I therefore wish to move that 1, we agree that the project should proceed to the design stage based on passive house option at 58.5 million. We note that the passive house option may present an opportunity to seek external funding and ask officers to submit a funding bid to the Learning Estate Improvement Programme for this project. Finally, 3, we ask officers to identify possible funding options for the shortfall of 8.5 million as part of the 21-22 budget process. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Invite Councillor Duff to second, please.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Elected members will recall the national debate which raged last year, in particular around the climate emergency, and I'm sure we can also recall the large number of school pupils outside 2 High Street demonstrating their concerns and asking this authority to take action to reduce carbon emissions. Given the current condition and suitability of our largest secondary, there can be no doubt about the need for a replacement building for Perth High School. The decision to use passive house construction methods will make this new school energy efficient, reducing carbon dioxide emissions by a further 140 metric tonnes per annum compared to the current version of the design. It will also utilise renewable heat sources linked to a smart energy network, which will only need about a third of the current energy requirements. This is a proactive decision which will, I am sure, be greeted enthusiastically by the pupils of Perth High School and by all of our young people in Perth and Kinross. We are aware that this decision will increase upfront costs, but it will save money in the long run and open up the opportunity to access financial support from the Scottish Government's Learning Estate Investment Programme. Deputy Provost, this is our climate emergency promise in action, and I have much pleasure in seconding the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. Now I invite members, are there any amendments or comments on this report? Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm delighted that we're at a point in time when we can finally move on towards our replacement building for Perth High School. Anyone that's been in there will know how desperately we need to get on with this work. When I attended the opening of Bertha Park High School, I encouraged parents and young people to attend the open day at the school to see what had been built there, and that the new Perth High School may end up being not dissimilar. I'm even more exciting then that what we're proposing today is really the next generation of school buildings, and that Perth High School and its replacement could really be at the vanguard of that. Since then, I'd like to thank our officers for the huge amount of work that's already been done and the investment that already started being made into the new building. What we're committing to today is building a state-of-the-art learning facility, which is built to the highest possible standards, ensuring that we meet our environmental obligations and deliver a school that pupils, staff, parents and the whole community can be proud of. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'm really enthusiastic or pleased with the enthusiasm shown for the passive house option, both in terms of the environmental impact that will have, and I thank Councillors Waters and Saba at this point for the work they've done on that and for educating me on the benefits of passive house. It's been really appreciated. But not only that, but also I hope that when our post-COVID world, once Perth High School's built, if we're not, or if there's something similar, I do think that the passive house model will also help to mitigate the effects of that. And I take Councillor McCall's points as well, that the education's going to be delivered in an ever-changing landscape. I do think that in Perth and Kinross we've been reasonably good at that up till now, Bertha Park being the most obvious example, but actually we're quite digitally advanced in some of our primary schools, Ailith, Kinross and Tulloch, for example. But I do take that point that we need to be very aware with Perth High School as we move forward that all elected members, and particularly the ward members, should be involved in the design of that school. It should be like for like in capacity only, but very different, I think, to the original build, clearly, which I think everybody will understand. I know that the catchment review was mentioned, I think, by Councillor McDade. I think that's something that's very viable. It's something I have sympathy with, but I think in the meantime we need to move ahead with Perth High School as a matter of urgency, and I very much support the paper. Thanks, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson. Sorry, Councillor Waters. beg your pardon, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Last year, members unanimously approved the climate emergency motion, which committed this council to accelerate and lead by example when dealing with the transformational change required to deal with the climate emergency. The choice of Passive House standard building is a welcome and important step in meeting that commitment. Just as importantly is the type of priorities we want to see in our new schools. Our responsibility as councillors should be to create a safe place that provides the best learning environment for our children as well as for staff. COVID-19 has highlighted the risks to health and dangers caused by the spread of airborne viruses within our buildings. With the employment of a mechanical air system used to keep a constant stream of fresh air throughout the school in a controlled manner, Passive House buildings will reduce the risk of any airborne virus circulating in the air, creating a safer school for our children. This will also provide a better learning environment, as higher oxygen levels in the air will lead to people being less drowsy during the day. I would ask that Council support the Passive House standards in both the new school builds and Blairgowrie Rec, showing our commitment to lead by example within the climate emergency, and also provide our children with the safest and most beneficial learning environment we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Deputy Provost, thanks very much indeed, and thanks for the report and all the work that's gone into that, and to the officers for their work so far with the high school capital scheme. A catchment review would just simply be distraction at this time. I'm pleased that Councillor Ribbick has indicated his support for cracking on, if I may summarise what he said. I think it's important too that we support the Passive House standards, and I totally support them. I'll certainly be supporting the motion when it comes to the time. Deputy Provost, you and others know that the condition of Perth High School is C and C, which is pretty basic. The students and staff and everyone else and the parents about Perth High School deserve better, and this afternoon we should show them that they deserve better. We don't want any more delays, we don't want any more dithering on this. There was a reference in a recent discussion about capital schemes, about officer schemes and member schemes. Well, this one in the ward that I represent, along with Councillor Coates and Councillor McCall, is certainly one that was initiated by myself. As soon as we finished Oakbank Primary School, I turned round to colleagues and said, right, let's get on with the high school now. And I'm happy to say that the late Councillor Bob Band was very strong in his support for that. And we took it forward. So therefore, I want to see this happening. I'm glad if we use the time of delay to look at any design features and can improve that and take account of any COVID issues. I think that's perfectly proper, and I'm sure that Stephen Crawford and his team will have that on board. I just want to see us getting on with this and making sure that we actually can deliver a school that will be fit for the 21st century on this site in Oakbank. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just a few very brief points that I wanted to make. First, fully supportive of the need to replace Perth High School and deliver a new school in this area. Also, very pleased to see that Leader of the Council is bringing forward a proposal that will build the new high school to Passive House standards, as a number of others have mentioned. I think that that's going to go a very good way to helping us achieve some of our climate change targets that we've all agreed to. I think that we'll probably be one of the first public buildings to be doing this, and when I tried to look at some other examples, I could only find one swimming pool. I'm not sure in terms of schools, but I think that it shows that Perth Kinross Council is very forward thinking on these issues, so that's very welcome indeed. The last comment I wanted to make was just on the issues that have been raised around a catchment review. While I note the comments that Councillor Wilson and others have said about needing to progress with this very quickly, and I agree and support that, I do think it is important that we take a more holistic view about making the best use of the school estate that we already have. We do have some schools that are not quite at capacity, so I would really support the opportunity to consider all of those issues together. And if that should require us to slightly modify the design, the size or the scale of Perth High School that we're rebuilding, then I hope that there would be an opportunity to reconsider that at a later stage to make sure we're making the best use of public money. But I fully support the motion that has been put forward for those reasons. Thanks.
Thank you. I note in the box that Councillor Parrott would like the text of the motion to be put back on the screen again, so perhaps that can be done, Audrey. Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just a couple of points. It has been the priority of this administration to put education right at the top of our agenda, and the education of young people very much stems from the building that they're in. This has been a major project that was brought forward by both the convener of education and by the leader of the council, and I am so pleased to see that we're actually giving this the care attention that it needs, and is going to, hopefully will move this motion forward today. I also want to mention that it has also been a priority of the administration to look at the eco side of things and the green and environmental side of things, and to be able to do this project and to move it forward by taking all of that into consideration is us actually doing, the administration actually doing what we set out to do. So I just wanted to highlight that, and I'm pleased and delighted to see this moving forward, and I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yeah, just wanted to again, I say I do support the project in terms of rebuilding of Perth High School. I think any of our schools that are not up to the condition they should be brought up to that condition, and absolutely Perth High School does need replaced. I think my point earlier about catchment review was actually making sure that none of our school estate is in this situation where we have to have a last minute rebuild essentially, and that we are planning into the future and having the right schools in the right places essentially. However, the main comment I would actually like to make is I would like to ask if the leader of the council might incorporate a commitment that a part of the school be maybe an auditorium or a lecture theatre or something like that, would perhaps be named in tribute to the late Councillor Bob Band, who not only was a ward councillor for Perth City South, but gave a huge amount to education across Perth and Kinross during his time as education convener, and I think it would be a fitting tribute to him by this council if we were to acknowledge him in that way.
Thank you very much. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I just wanted to say that I fully support this motion, and to say how pleased I am that colleagues have remembered that there's a climate emergency and that we did pass a motion in support of a climate emergency, as many colleagues seem to have forgotten this whilst discussing the previous item. Also, as regards the previous item, I can offer a bit of helpful advice that if we have any doubt about where to find the money to make up the £8.5 million shortfall, that could easily be done if you were to take my advice and abandon the Crosstail Link Road.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Deputy Convener. I would just like to fully support Councillor McDade's proposal. And it would be, I'd like to hear from the leader of the council if he's willing to incorporate that, in that we do recognise all the work that the SNP councillor Bob Band for that ward has done for education and for bringing forward the proposal of Perth High School. I think it's a fitting tribute to one of our own, and I don't mean that as party political. He's one of our own as a colleague across the chamber. So I was wondering if you could, if the leader of the council could respond to Councillor McDade's request, please.
Thank you very much for your comments, everyone's comments, and in particular Grant Lane's request there. I don't know if this is whether Councillor Lyle.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Yep, I appreciate the sentiment from both Councillor McDade and Councillor Lane, and I have absolutely no hesitation, and I will put that request forward. I'm well aware of Councillor Band's commitment not only to his ward but also to education in his previous role as convener. So I'm happy to progress that request, and I look forward to informing members in the future.
Deputy Provost, can I thank the Leader of the Council for taking that on board? I really appreciate it, and I'm sure Bob's widow will as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, if there are no further comments, I will now ask Councillor Lyle.
I have a comment, Deputy Provost.
Sorry, Councillor McCall. Oh, I just see it now. Sorry, Councillor McCall.
Thank you. Sometimes there's a delayed reaction to these things. Right. Thank you, Deputy Provost. I just want to say that I fully support this motion. I'm particularly pleased that of the assurances that have been given by officers about the operational that the operational impacts of COVID will be incorporated into the work that's going to take place going forward, and particularly in the changing environment we have around teaching and learning. So I want to thank officers for that, and I'm sure that the Leader of the Administration will incorporate those comments into the work going forward. As you know, this school is in my ward. I support the Parent Council. And I'm at the school a lot. The population is increasing in my ward considerably, and so while I understand the merits of a catchment review, I do not think that should hold up the progress of this school. And I would suggest, and I would really urge the officers and the administration to move forward with it with some speed. I would just finally, I would just like to say it's very gratifying. The genesis of this new build for the Perth High School came from the previous SNP administration, so it's very encouraging to see that it has gained cross-party support with Councillor Wilson and claiming some credit for that, and also the administration so enthusiastically supporting it. So I thank everybody for their efforts to do this, and I'm sure that the parents and the teachers and the pupils and the parents of Perth High School look forward to the new school with eagerness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCall. I think all councillors from all parties and those of none have always realised that Perth High School rebuild was a priority, and I'm going to talk personally as a grandmother who's got 2 children at the school just now, and one will be going hopefully before this school is finished. So I am more than delighted that we are all united and supporting this motion today by the administration. So thank you all very much for your support for this Perth High School project. Okay, thank you very much. We will now move on to Appendix 4, Perth City Hall project. Are there any questions on this report? I don't see anybody putting any questions. No questions from anyone? Okay, so Councillor McBarnacle.
Yes, thanks, Deputy Convener. I just wanted some sort of guarantee from officers that should we, for any reason, pause this development or move to think again about what might eventually happen there, that it wouldn't revert to a situation whereby the City Hall itself was in jeopardy, because I do not want to see a return to the debate about whether we should retain it or not. I think we should retain it as a facility, and I'd like to see it moved forward as a project. So I'm just seeking some assurance on that. Presumably the role of Historic Scotland is paramount in this. Could I have an assurance on that?
Councillor Barnacle, I'll start by trying to answer your question, and David Littlejohn, if he's still in the meeting, may want to add to what I say. As you will be aware, the City Hall is identified as a building at risk on the Historic Environment Scotland register, and as you will also be aware, and the report in front of you makes clear, Historic Environment Scotland have consistently refused permission to demolish the building, and a lot of work has happened in the past to try and identify a viable reuse of the building following its closure in 2004. I think all I can say to you is that the reason that this project has been developed over the past 4 years on the back of market appraisal a couple of years, which started a couple of years before that, is because repurposing the building for cultural use had been identified as a viable option. However, there are no immediate alternative solutions available to councillors to consider if we pause or do not proceed with the project.
Thanks for that clarity. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. I could see your lips moving, but wasn't sure you weren't unmuted. My question is pretty simple to officers, really, and I have asked this before, but are officers satisfied that we have looked at all alternatives and exhausted them for partnerships with perhaps other organisations or museums going into City Hall? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor James. If your question is about how the building might be operated in partnership with another museum or another organisation, just a reminder, and I know that this may seem obvious, that the key partner in delivering this project is Culture Perth Kinross, which is the Council's arm's length organisation, which the Council tasks with delivering museums and operating museums. So it's important, I think, although perhaps obvious, Councillor James, not to overlook the fact that we already have a key delivery partner in this project. In terms of wider partnerships, Culture Perth Kinross has already pursued and is building on a range of partnerships at national and UK level, including with the British Museum, National Museums Scotland, National Galleries of Scotland, Hunterian over in Glasgow, with whom we already have a very strong partnership in relation to our archaeological collections and the research that we do around those collections, which are a really key strand of the proposed exhibitions at City Hall. So I wouldn't want councillors to be under the impression that these partnerships are not already either in existence or under active development.
Thanks very much for that. That's what I was actually getting at. I do know the Culture Perth Kinross are an organisation in their own right. It was just the question I often get asked. Sorry, Deputy Provost, is like Dundee partnered with a national museum. I just wondered if Perth Kinross did, and obviously we've exhausted all of those options, but thank you for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I think the question I would have, well, first of all, there's a question I'd previously put to Mrs. Robertson about the job benefit from the City Hall. It's listed in the risks appendix, the risk assessment appendix, and it was just to clarify whether the 54/34 full-time equivalent new jobs are a gross figure or a net figure once we take into account staff movements between PMAG, JD, Ferguson Gallery and the City Hall, proposed new City Hall.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Stewart, and apologies, you asked this question in the briefing and I didn't get back to you. I apologise for that. That is a net figure, Councillor Stewart, so it takes into account both existing staff plus new jobs that would be created as a result of the project, but the bulk of those jobs are existing roles within Culture Perth and Kinross or the council. So, for example, we have a graduate trainee. We have proposals within the project to recruit a further modern apprentice as well to develop historic building and conservation skills. There are additional jobs which I know you are aware of, Councillor Stewart, which are associated with the construction side of the project as well.
Okay, thank you. And the other part of the question is, again on risks, 4.3, the potential of there being a prolonged impact from COVID on visitor and income projections. The current risk mitigation is to reassess the visitor and income projections and revise the investment objectives as part of the full business case for the project. Is that a way of saying that basically we would downgrade the projections for visitor numbers and income, basically just sort of shift the goalposts on what the investment objectives of the project are?
We're not saying that, Councillor Stewart. I think what we are saying, and again, apologies, this is probably self-evident to all of us, is that the impact of COVID and how that will play out in the longer term is not knowable at the moment. It's a bit like the answer that Stephen Crawford has given in response to questions about previous projects, about the impact on timeline for delivering projects which COVID may have. So what we are saying is that COVID creates an additional risk because we don't know yet, it's not knowable at this point in time, how visitor levels, visitor numbers to museum attractions and also visitor behaviours, in particular dwell time, how long people are willing to spend in an attraction when they get there, whether they're willing to spend as much time in the cafe, how much disposable income they have to spend in the shop, etc. So what we're saying is we need to review our current assumptions on the basis of emerging evidence, and it is only emerging evidence just now from UK attractions and those across the rest of the world. And if we need to revise the investment objectives on the basis of that data and evidence, Councillor Stewart, that is what we would need to do. I'm just looking, whilst Council has been happening this morning, at the latest set of feedback which has come on the outline business case for this project from the Culture and Tourism Joint Board, which is part of the governance of Tay City Deal, which has highlighted some real strengths in the outline business case, in particular the real need, which I think we all identify, to increase the critical mass of tourism attractions in Perth, and that's a real plus. It's useful to have that very positive feedback, but if we need to revise the investment objectives because we don't think that our original visitor assumptions or income assumptions are necessarily going to follow through, then we will come back to Council to let you know that. And do that through the route of the programme board chaired by Councillor Lyle.
So this issue of the income projections, so obviously those current income projections are incorporated into the revenue forecast, which is at 5.2. So if there are reduced visitor numbers and therefore potentially reduced income projections for the City Hall, those figures of £500,000 operating deficit in 5.2, that could potentially increase.
Potentially it could increase, Councillor Stewart, but that is not knowable at the moment.
And sorry, those revenue numbers, the operating deficit, that does not include loan charges. That is simply the operation of the venue. The loan charges for the capital borrowing are on top of that.
That's correct, Councillor Stewart. That's the way that we show all our revenue projections on for the business case on capital projects is our loan service charges are shown separately, but I think stroke hope transparently as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Excuse me. I'm on a similar line here regarding paragraph 110 of page 143. I wonder if you could give me the basis of the outline business case figures of circa 150,000 annual visits. That's fully 400 per day, 365 days a year for the new City Hall. Can you give me some outline as to where these figures come from?
Yes, happy to do that, Councillor Gray. So the assumptions are based on a range of data sources, which the independent advisors who helped us with the market appraisal, which underpins the business case, pulled together for us. Some of those data sources are national, so they look at comparable visitor attractions across Scotland. Some of them are at UK level, some of them are at Perth and Kinross level. And as the report in front of you makes clear, when we did that original market appraisal, we compared visitor numbers to the cultural offer in Perth city centre as it then was with performance of other cities and indeed cultural attractions elsewhere in Scotland. And we looked at what the visitor levels to and visitor numbers to those other attractions were. We then assessed the different segments of the visitor market, the potential visitor market, and the report goes into a little bit of detail about that. So it looked at maximum number of people that might visit City Hall who live within a 30-minute travel time of Perth, which is a very important market. Maximum number of people who might make a day visit to Perth. And this is very important in the context of the city deal, because one of the things, as you've heard us say many times before, that underpins the city deal is the need to make the region more sticky, the need to bring visitors to the area who will visit Perth, Dundee, Pitlochry, to the benefit of the region as a whole. So we assessed all these different visitor market sizes, benchmarked our assumptions against comparable attractions, and that took us to a range of projected visitor numbers of between 140 and 160,000 visitors per year by year 3. Now that is an assumption, and that's why we go through the outline business case, full business case process, Councillor Gray, to continue to test that assumption. But we are as confident as it's possible to be that they are reasonable assumptions based on the data and evidence that we drew on.
And can I just ask, Fiona, are you satisfied that only 13% of that total figure will actually be drawn toward the because of, I presume that's what it implies, because of the Stone of Destiny, should it appear?
That's a really difficult question to answer, Councillor Gray, because the honest answer is we don't know. The Stone of Destiny has never been on display in Scotland anywhere but Edinburgh Castle. That's not a good benchmark because Edinburgh Castle is a paid attraction, as you know. The admission charges vary, but can be, up to £17 or so for adult admission. And the majority of visitors to Edinburgh Castle are not day visitors living in Scotland. The majority of visitors to Edinburgh Castle are international and UK tourists. So it's been very, very difficult for us to come up with an accurate assumption on that. And for that reason, again, as you've heard me say before, our assumption around the number of people who will come to see the Stone of Destiny and just the Stone of Destiny is very conservative. It's important, if I may, just to remember that this is not about one single silver bullet which will address Perth's underperformance as a tourist destination. And that continues to be an issue and a concern to us in terms of the economic development and recovery of the city. We know that retail is changing significantly. We know that certainly currently mass participation events that we used to rely on to draw very large numbers of people into the city centre are currently not possible. So therefore, the quality of our cultural tourism and our tourism offer as a whole is really important. And that's not just about the Stone of Destiny. It's not just about City of Hall. It's about a whole circle of mutually reinforcing things, attractions that will bring people to Perth and Kinross and to the region, which is one of the reasons why City Hall is flagged in the Tay City deal as a project of UK and potentially international significance.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Two questions, if I may. The first one follows up on Councillor Stewart's question about the revenue costs and your answer, Fiona, that the revenue loan charges are not included in the costs for the ongoing operation. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible to get an estimate of what we think the council's liability will be going forward in terms of the loan charges. That's the first part of the question. And I don't know if you want the two separately or whether you want them together, Deputy Provost.
Well, if they're linked, they can be together.
Okay, and the second point was on the capital finances and the fact that the cost have increased, and there's a number of justifications in the paper given for that. I'm just slightly concerned that it now seems that the council's contribution is going to be about 66% above what we were originally anticipating, notwithstanding some of the issues about not being able to say with any certainty as a result of COVID and some of the other challenges that we're facing. Is there any potential to rescope some of the designs or bring some of that back into line with what our original projections were in terms of what the council's capital contribution to that project would be?
If it's all right, Councillor Purvis, thank you for the questions. I'll answer the second question, and Stephen Crawford may want to add to what I say. On your first question about loan charges, I think Stuart Mackenzie is probably better placed to answer that than me. On your second question, yes, the estimated project cost has risen. You will be aware, I know, Councillor Purvis, that we do have strong project governance in place around the project. The report explains some of the reasons why the project costs have gone up. We have value engineered, taken cost savings on the project, the capital cost of the project, and we've done a lot of work on that over the last 2 to 3 months. It will be possible to achieve further savings. It is always possible to achieve further savings, but that will mean revisiting key parts of the current design, which will need to be considered by the programme board, the project board for City Hall. At this stage, however, what we wanted to do was to bring the project as it was currently, as it is currently designed and proposed to you as councillors, and to give you a clear and objective view of what the estimated cost is for the project as it stands. But Stephen may want to add to that just in terms of giving a bit of background around the reason for the cost increase, and then Stuart, I'm sure, will come back on the loan charge point.
Thank you, Fiona. If I could just on your question about the opportunities for rescoping the project, we've been through effectively about a 6-month redesign exercise. When we got the original costs back, to look at where the increases had come from. The view of the senior officer group is that if we've effectively taken £3 million out of the project through redesign, the reasons for increasing were the market response, some of the detailed design as a result of being in the existing building, and the expensive way of having to redevelop it internally. We consider that we've got a position where if we go any further, it would materially affect the original brief the vision and the quality of the final product, should we take further costs out?
Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions in the chat box, so I will now invite Councillor Lyle to move this part of the report, please.
Sorry, Deputy Provost, I think that Stuart Mackenzie, you indicated.
Oh, sorry,
indicated would answer the second question. Thank you.
My apologies.
Thank you, Deputy Provost, and thank you, Councillor Provost, for your question. So, if we assume a construction cost of £26.5 million, £10 million of that being funded through the Tay-Cities deal, that gives us a net cost of £16.5 million to finance. The building will have a useful life, I would imagine, well in excess of 50 years. So, broadly speaking, as an indication, the loan charges would be somewhere in the order of £550,000 to £600,000 per annum to service that level of debt.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will now invite Councillor Lyle to move this part of the report. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and thank you to the officers again for bringing forward this very detailed report this afternoon. There's no doubt that Perth City Hall has been a challenge to this council for some 20 years or more. Today we have the opportunity to confirm the council's long-term strategy to grow the cultural tourism market share, which will bring economic benefit not just to Perth but to the whole of Perth and Kinross. The Tay-City deal, which will be concluded shortly, has earmarked £10 million of funding for this important project, as it is recognised as being critically important to growing the cultural offer, not just in Perth but across Tayside. Should we decide to halt or even pause this project today, I fear that we may allow others to call into question our commitment or our ambition for the Stone of Destiny. I would urge all elected members to write to the Scottish Government asking them to do everything in their power to secure a positive decision from the Commissioners as soon as possible. This in turn would give a huge boost to the citizens of Perth, but also the citizens throughout Tayside. I therefore ask that the Council approve the project to proceed to financial close and construction. 2. Note the current estimated project costs and ask officers to identify possible funding options for the identified shortfall of £3.3 million as part of the 21-22 budget process. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Duff to second the report, please.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Much has been said and debated about the use of Perth City Hall over the years. The advent of the Tay-Cities deal has given this city the opportunity to deliver a long-awaited cultural attraction of national importance. This will grow our cultural tourism and bring much needed economic benefit to the city centre in particular and to Perth and Kinross in general. The Tay-Cities deal has recently reaffirmed the project's value to the area and authorised the submission of the full business case. The City Hall project has strong community, business and political support, and we very much welcome the Tay-Cities deal promise of £10 million of funding towards the project cost. Deputy Provost, this council should similarly reaffirm this project today and send a strong signal to the First Minister of our collective desire to see the Stone of Destiny brought home. A proposal to do anything less would hand our City of Edinburgh rivals a late penalty kick and could snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. I now invite comments or any amendment, so please indicate in the chat box. Thank you. Councillor Ling, you have an amendment.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost, and I think officers will put that up now. I'm waiting, Deputy Provost. I think the officers have the amendment, so hopefully
Yes.
they'll put up for everybody to see.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know whether you wanted to begin speaking to your amendment. Well, I think it's going to happen now. Okay, there we are. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll read it through. I'm sure everybody can read it, but that's basically what the amendment is about. So, while remaining fully supportive of the City Hall project, this council now approves pausing of this project for further consideration during the full capital budget review process to take place in early 2021. It's considered prudent to pause this project now to minimise risk to the full capital budget, while the UK government, after many months of delay, has still not formally signed the Tay Cities deal, which provides £10 million to support the City Hall project, and while the Commissioners of the Regalia have still not advised Her Majesty the Queen of their recommendation with regard to Perth and Kinross Council's application for the Stone of Destiny to move to Perth to form an important component of the Perth City Hall offer. It is very much hoped that the position with regard to these two decisions can be made clear in time to inform the full capital budget review process early in 2021. This should not be seen, so that's the amendment. I would like to speak to it, and I say this should not be seen by anyone as us losing any commitment to the project. We just feel that reading through page 144 and 145 with the key risks and key issues, that there are far too many moving parts in this project at this time, and to press the green button without having full knowledge of the component parts is not a prudent way to move forward. It should also be seen, rather than a sign of weakness, it should be seen as a sign of strength, that we want the stone, we need the stone, because we feel it will be such an important part of the project. So we're sending a message that of how much we need this to be an important part of the cultural offer of Perth and Kinross. So that's the amendment I wish to move.
Thank you very much. Councillor Drysdale, you wish to second it?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, I remain fully supportive, as I always have been, for the development of the City Hall on the basis that it would house Scotland's historic Stone of Destiny when it returns to its origins. It is regrettable but completely understandable that due to the global pandemic, it has not yet been possible for the Commissioners for the safeguarding of the regalia to arrive at their recommendation to the Queen. It will hopefully not be too long before decision time is reached, and when it is, I sincerely hope and trust that the City Hall development project can then be progressed. In the meantime, Deputy Provost, I am of the view that it is a sensible and pragmatic approach to pause this project in these financially constrained times, rather than incur further capital expenditure. This stance should in no way be seen as any lack of enthusiasm whatsoever for the return of Scotland's stone to its rightful place. Deputy Provost, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you very much. Are there any other amendments? I have now
Deputy Provost. Sorry, Deputy Provost, I'm just having trouble typing in the box there. I wonder if I could ask for a 10-minute recess, if that would be acceptable, please.
Councillor Stewart, that is just what I was just about to say, so thank you. There has been a request for recess, so I'm proposing we have a recess for 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Deputy Provost, I'm more than agreeable to the 10-minute recess, but I wonder if it would be prudent to find out the answer to your question if there are any other amendments before we have the recess.
I'm presuming not.
Deputy Provost, I'm considering one. I would like a recess for further consideration, for time for further consideration.
Very well.
Granted.
Provost, I'm not entirely sure why we should be granting time for consideration of drafting further amendments. Members have had ample opportunity to draft and submit any amendments that they wanted with regard to this matter, and I see nothing to be gained by having a recess. And we've had no explanation of what a recess would actually achieve.
Councillor Barrett, before Councillor Stewart said he was considering amendment, I had already had the request for a recess, and I think it was agreed that if groups wanted to have a recess to discuss things, that would be permissible. So I wasn't aware they were going to be drafting another amendment at that stage. It was a recess to consider the two motions, the motion and the amendment, I understood.
But I think, with respect, Deputy Provost, Councillor Stewart's already indicated that he intends to use the recess not to consider the motion and the amendment which have been put forward, but to consider a further amendment. If we're to consider the amendments, we'd need to know what all the amendments are first of all before we go into the recess, surely.
I agree with you, Councillor Wilson, but I did not have that information when I agreed to have the initial recess.
Sorry, Deputy Provost, if I may, we're in the unusual situation where there aren't any recommendations in the report. So when motions are brought forward, that's the first time many of us are seeing them. I think if we spent less time debating about whether to have a recess, then we'd probably resume quicker. So if we can just proceed on that basis, I think that would be quicker for everyone if that's possible.
And if
Deputy Provost, if I may come in, please. Councillor Dyer still has a point of order, and I suggest that you take a moment to take some advice, please, from the Head of Legal and Governance and the Monitoring Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And yes, my point of order, if I may, Deputy Provost, was that I had understood that you had ruled that there was to be a recess, and I was simply wishing to make the point that that was the end of the matter, and that we should have the recess. I guess if we do have to have a further recess, if there is another amendment, then that is unfortunately what might have to happen.
Lisa, please, can you give us some advice?
I think the position is, Kathleen, you did rule and you permitted a recess. So in this position, let's just take the recess and see where we are after that discussion. And I'll give some consideration during that recess as to how we're going to manage recesses for multiple in respect of other papers. But you've given that you did rule on that you would grant a recess. Let's just grant the recess and move the business on. Yeah.
Okay, it'll be a recess for 10 minutes. Thank you.
There's making a quick brew, Kathleen.
Well, we're still live. We're not in recess.
Are we ready to restart the meeting? But I'm not sure if everyone actually has returned. I think there's some groups are not complete.
Deputy Provost, I suggest you've been more than generous with the timescale allowed. You set out 10 minutes, it's more than 10 minutes.
I agree, Chief Executive. I've been very lenient today. I'm not sure if the Leader of the Council is back yet.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'm just arriving. Yep.
Good. Right. I'm
waiting for Councillor Duff. Hopefully he will be able to rejoin us shortly. Councillor Lane's arrived. Okay, as we don't appear to be having anyone else in the meeting currently, then we ought to proceed.
Right. Right. Ready to restart. We left to the point when there was to be a request was granted for a recess. We've had that. We have now returned. At which stage we asked for amendments, and we had one amendment. With the consideration it was to be another amendment. Do we know if there is another amendment before we go to the question, the comments?
No.
Okay, so we will now Collins, Councillor Stewart.
Yep.
Have you got an amendment here?
Once again, as per earlier, I would rather not propose a second amendment, but I wonder whether the Leader of the Council might consider incorporating the following wording into his motion. That the Council notes the revenue budget implication of a projected £500,000 operating deficit for the new museum, separate from the loan charges for the capital borrowing required, and therefore requests officers to review the operational model with a view to reducing the ongoing operational deficit to decrease the revenue costs, and to revisit any opportunities to maximise the potential of a new cultural tourist attraction by seeking to make further partnerships with international gallery, museum brands or sponsors. The reason for this is that I think everybody has recognised that we're in a situation in terms of finances, in terms of the budget, where we need to make sure that we are carefully responsible.
I'm sorry, Provost or Deputy Provost, but on a point of order, either Councillor Stewart's moving an amendment or he's made a request to the Leader of the Council, which the Leader of the Council should respond to.
I think if Councillor Stewart's got this amendment, we need to see it in writing to know what we're actually saying. It's a lot of words for us all to take in. So
thanks. I've forwarded that on to Mr. Hendry to see if he can get it on screen. I just thought in the meantime that I would speak to it and then provide my justification, then the council leader could accept the wording or not. We're in a situation obviously where in terms of budgets we have to be very careful and mindful of every single penny of public money that we spend. And the thing that I think is most concerning about the paper before us, Appendix 4, is the ongoing revenue cost. So the approximate £500,000 operating deficit on top of as was indicated in an answer to Councillor Purvis, the 550 to 600,000 per annum loan charge cost to the revenue budget. It's therefore critical, in my opinion, that we try and reduce at least the revenue operating deficit, and that's what the wording that I have suggested to Councillor Lyle seeks to achieve. The other aspect is that in order to achieve a unique selling point, a genuinely unique offer of a new cultural attraction.
You do realise he's running the show now.
Councillor Stewart, right?
Yeah.
Just stop. Can I ask Councillor Lyle if he's happy to incorporate this amendment that Councillor Stewart is? It's quite difficult when this is virtually. I understand sometimes everybody's connections is not working, so I'm just trying to be fair to everyone here.
Deputy Provost, can I make a suggestion?
Yes,
I have the wording from Councillor Stewart. I suggest we pause to allow my colleagues to put that on the screen so that everybody can see it clearly, and then we can divert to Councillor Lyle for him to consider whether he wishes to accept it.
Thank you.
My question is, are we going to get some words put on the screen?
Yes, we're waiting for it.
Thank you. Deputy Provost, if I might respond to what we have on the screen. I would like to say that I don't suspect this is an amendment from Councillor Stewart. It's something that he wishes to incorporate into the motion, and given that the wording of it, and given I'm very concerned that we pause might send out the wrong messages to others, particularly those who are in the decision-making process, I'm minded to accept the suggestions from Councillor Stewart and incorporate them into the motion.
Deputy Provost, I'm also content to accept them as part of our motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you to both Councillor Lyle and Councillor Duff again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we can have comments. Thank you. And now I need to try and find out where we were. Councillor Gray, I think you were first with your comment.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. In view of being cut off earlier on questions, I presumed, and I take it this is right, that the basis of the figures for the Stone of Destiny were based upon those visitors to the Edinburgh Castle who actually visited the Stone of Destiny, this being around 13%. Now, Edinburgh itself is simply Scottish history in stone. The entire city is history in stone. And one other stone there, I'm surprised it even drew 13% of the audience who entered the castle. In Perth, that same stone would be quite different. It is wholly significant to Perth. wholly significant to Perth, the surrounding area, including Scone, of course, that the Stone of Destiny is a key element of this project. And whilst I would welcome the project itself, the whole project, the stone is the key part of it. And until that stone is guaranteed to be coming to the City Hall, I definitely support the amendment to pause until such time as we know better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Where are we?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think investment in the City Hall is vital to the future economic growth and cultural offer of our city, to enhancing its heritage offer to visitors and to the regeneration of our city centre. And having endured numerous false dawns and failed hopes for the City Hall, and with 10 million government funding committed through the T-Cities deal, I believe that now is definitely the time to hold our resolve and to see the project through without pause. And regardless of the protestations of the movers of Amendment and seconder of Amendment 1, their amendment will surely send a message to Nicola Sturgeon and the keepers of the regalia that there are doubts about whether to proceed, and it could jeopardise the £10 million Tay-City deal funding. And far from adding pressure to a recommendation that should already have been made to the Queen, it will weaken our case markedly, and I think our case is already markedly weakened by the incorporation of Councillor Stewart's comments into the motion. What we should be focusing on are the direct economic benefits of the redeveloped City Hall as set out on page 149 of the report. 160,000 visitors a year and over 200,000 visitors a year to both the Perth City Hall and Perth Museum and Art Gallery, together getting a bigger bang for our buck, delivering 3 million GVA to Perth and Kinross, 34 full-time equivalent new jobs, and a beating heart at the centre of our city, and not an empty vessel or a mouldering monument to municipal failure and indecision. We need to hold our nerve, demonstrate our commitment to the project and our ambition for our city and its wider region, and we should not allow any dilution of our commitments to that, or any lightening of the pressure on the keepers of the regalia to put the Stone of Destiny in its proper resting place in Perth.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and I'll try to keep my comments brief. Just to say that that my two main concerns with this project have been addressed by the amended wording that Councillor Lyle has now agreed to. As I articulated through my questioning earlier, I am quite concerned about the ongoing revenue deficit that seems to be built into the existing plans, and would be really keen if we could try to address that, particularly given the loan charges which we'll be paying back over a significant period of time. I don't think we should also then be planning, especially when we're also looking at other revenue streams through a cafe and bar, to start with a deficit. So that would be really good if officers can try and consider, similar to what we're doing on the PH2O and some of the other projects, look at other options to try and address that. Secondly, on the issue of trying to tie in with an international brand, I think that has worked extremely successfully in the case of the V&A. And I note the answers that were given to Councillor James's question, which I think was really useful. And while those partnerships are indeed welcome, I think we need to perhaps go further to try and attract some kind of major brand link-up that would complement what we already have at the V&A Dundee. So I said I'd be brief. I'll end there. I hope you'll be glad to hear, Deputy Provost, but thank you to the Leader of the Council for that amended wording.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purvis, from taking heed of some of the things I say, so that's quite good. Councillor Laying, I think I maybe missed your comment out. There were so many bits of chit chat, I wasn't sure what were comments. So Councillor Laying, I'll go to you now.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and I'm happy to continue with our amendment. It's very unfortunate that the Leader of the Council and the administration could not negotiate over such an important item as this prior instead of running around at the last minute. And actually, it looks as though the tail is wagging the dog here, and I'm sure that people out in the community can see what's happened here. So that's very unfortunate.
Can I just remind you, you actually spoke because you moved the amendment.
Yes, but then we're surely allowed a comment.
You're at comments at the moment, so you maybe make your comment when you had your amendment, moving your amendment.
How could you make a comment when there was another amendment came after it?
There hasn't been another amendment.
Yes. No, it's not been another amendment now.
Sorry, I thought I saw it on the chat was as an amendment. But if you don't want me to speak, I'll just stop there then.
That's fine, thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. I now agree with the motion. Now that the addition has been made, Councillor Stewart's addition has been added to it. I've got great concerns about the huge revenue costs for the City Hall. On top of that, the debt servicing charges, which is kind of a huge amount of money. We looked earlier on at the revenue budget and the pressures that are going to be placed on it. If you walk around Perth, and even now you can see buildings that we've put up, like the concert hall. If you go around the back of the concert hall, it's badly in need of repairs, which have never been carried out. We have to maintain what we've got, and if to try and build even more public buildings without the necessary funding in place to maintain them, I've got concerns about. So I'll be voting with the motion with the inclusion of Councillor Stewart's additional words.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I just wanted to take a sort of bigger picture view on this, and I will be supporting the motion with its addition. We need to look at the staycation and the changes that COVID are going to bring. We've mentioned this at various other points in today's debates on various different papers, and to look at that uncertainty. But what we do know is that we know that the building can't be demolished. We know that we have Tay-City funding for it, and we know that we need to look at the offer that we have for people wanting to stay in Scotland and come to Perth and Kinross as a holiday. We need to promote Perth and Kinross. We need to encourage them. We need to have every single element utilised to its fullest, and that will include the cultural offer that we need to put forward. And I think that this is a massive step forward as far as that's concerned. We don't get the best of weather in Perth and Kinross or in Scotland. Even it's not, people don't come here so they can go for a swim and sit in suntan. They go because they can walk around in our fantastic scenery, that they can go and look at our cultural offer, and we need to do that. So on a big picture level, I think this is really important that we drive this forward, and that's exactly what I'll be voting to do. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I think I've clicked all the things I ought to. I'm very strongly in favour of us proceeding today with this scheme. It's not often you get a £10 million offer to help support it. But my main point, Deputy Provost, is that this is a key part of our cultural strategy that relates to the theatre, relates to the concert hall, it relates to our museum and art gallery. And if we're seen to dither and delay, and that's what the amendment says to me, waiting for this or waiting for that, then that will be picked up. It'll be picked up first of all by Edinburgh, who will think, oh, Perth don't really mean this. They're swithering and dithering, and also it will mean that costs will increase again, and we'll be seen as the people who are not resolved in what we want to do. This is a prime scheme for the city centre in Perth. We need to crack on with it. Let's do it now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'm with Councillor Robertson on this. I've now been persuaded that we should go with the motion with the added words from Councillor Stewart, because I think they are appropriate. And also the other point about delay is it says in the report that a pause may severely impact on the bid for the Stone of Destiny to come to Perth. And it's absolutely crucial that we send a message that we want that. We want that as part of this deal. And I don't want personally any more delays regarding the City Hall project. I want the council to move forward with the best possible project that we've got. It's just unfortunate that we haven't at this stage got a signed city's deal and a confirmation from the commissioners of the regalia. Perhaps we can put pressure on even further between now and when we have the next budget meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnacle. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Earlier on today, we were all almost entirely unanimous over the Crosstay Link Road that we shouldn't just keep kicking cans down the road. And I think the same applies to this. This is something that's been around for years. We've got an opportunity to make something of it. Let's just get on with it. Let's stop all the dithering and the delaying, and let's make some decisions and get some action in Perth to help the people of Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Yes, I have debated and discussed City Hall for many, many years, so I'll be really pleased to see if we can get to some conclusion and actually see some more action is what we all want. So if there are no more comments, I will ask Councillor Lyle to sum up, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and I'd like to thank all members for their comments, and just to say that I fully understand Councillor Lane and Councillor Drysdale's amendment. However, I have to say I don't agree with it. I think it is critical that we move forward today with this project, given that we are hopefully in the last lap with the Tay City deal, and we don't, and personally, I don't think it's appropriate that Perth and Kinross sends out a message that it's proposing to pause a project. I think we've got to keep on as much pressure as possible. I also feel it's an opportunity for elected members to write to the Scottish Government and ask them to put as much pressure as possible on the commissioners to get a response, hopefully a positive response. And finally, I am just my final point was that I am aware, because I've had discussions with the leader of Edinburgh City Council, that he will be paying attention to this vote today. And if he sees that we are in any way hesitating, I am sure he will make it well known the fact that our ambition and commitment to this project are very limited. I would also like to add that the officers, whilst looking for as close to or as low a revenue cost with this project as possible, there is a need for reality, and there isn't any cultural venue in the country that works profitably or on a cost neutral basis. So there will undoubtedly be some costs, but hopefully officers will be able to come back with alternatives that give us a lower cost profile going forward. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. We are now ready to move to the vote, so I'll hand over to Scott.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillors, we are dealing with item 5 on the agenda, and this time Appendix 4, the Perth City Hall project. We have a motion from Councillor Lyle, seconded by Councillor Duff, that was amended to incorporate the proposal of the wording from Councillor Stewart. We have an amendment from Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Drysdale, again, which was shared with you on the screen. Unless members require any further clarity on the wording, I will now move to the vote. When I call out members' names, if you can confirm whether you're voting for the motion or the amendment. Councillor Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Barnacle.
Motion.
Councillor Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Brock.
Amendment.
Councillor Audrey Coates. Councillor Coates. Thank you, Councillor Coates.
Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis.
Motion.
Councillor Lane.
Amendment.
Councillor Lyle.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor McDade.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Okay. Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Parrott.
Amendment.
Councillor Pover.
Amendment.
Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Amendment.
Councillor Reid. Councillor Reid.
I think he's maybe
Motion.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
Thank you.
Councillor Sarwar.
Amendment.
Councillor Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Simpson.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
Councillor Williamson.
Amendment.
And Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Deputy Provost, I have 21.
Excuse me, Deputy Provost, I didn't get asked to vote.
Councillor Robertson, I have you recorded as voting for the motion.
Oh, that's fine. I didn't say anything then. Thanks very much. You must have read my mind. Well done.
Oh, just Councillor Robertson, I did hear you say motion.
Okay, good.
Provost, the Deputy Provost, I have 21 votes for the motion and 16 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Good news story for Perth Kinross today, so that's excellent news. Now I'm proposing that we have a 10-minute recess, 10-minute comfort break. So we'll return again at 15:35. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, councillors, it's now 15:35. Are we ready to resume?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We now come to Appendix 5, Blairgowrie Recreation Centre. So are there any questions before I invite Councillor Lyle to move the report? Could I remind councillors also to put their microphones back on mute? Seems to be a rustling of papers. Are there no questions on this report?
Councillor Forbes, is that a question or is it?
Councillor Stewart.
Just one question following up on the issues about Passive House and net zero carbon. In 2.1, we're talking about the lowest energy target of 67 kilowatt hours per square metre per annum for school projects, but that target doesn't seem to be met in the table in 2.6 with Passive House. We're at 221 kilowatt hours per square metre. Is there a different standard applied, or is the Passive House not going to meet the requirement set out, or is the requirement set out not correct?
Stephen, yes, please.
Yeah, Deputy Provost, if I could answer that. The 67 is a target for schools generally. This is a recreation centre, so that 67 wouldn't be considered a target for that. We've endeavoured to, at Passive House, to give a target of 221, which is in terms of that's about a 60% reduction on the current one, but 67 would be far too optimistic for a swimming pool facility.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions on this report. In that case, I'll invite Councillor Lyle to move this report, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost, and I shall be relatively brief. As you will be aware, we currently have an allocation in the capital budget of £15.1 million for the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre. And as I stated earlier today, we as a council previously unanimously agreed that we should lead by example to tackle the impact of climate change. Therefore, today I am directing officers to bring forward design specifications to meet Passive House standards. Under the agreed specifications for the building to incorporate Passive House standards, it will take the costs up to 24 million. This is an increase in build costs, but it will allow us to achieve significant savings in the future, particularly with revenue costs, and to deliver better outcomes from the community in Blairgowrie and Rattray. So I therefore move that 1, the council proceeds with the project on the basis of a Passive House design. 2, notes the project cost is now 24 million. 3, ask officers to ensure that the design specification delivers best value that it can in terms of delivering better outcomes for the local community. And 4, asks officers to identify possible funding options to address the shortfall of £8.9 million as part of the 21-22 budget process. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Audrey, is this motion going to be put up on the screen also? Okay.
I think Audrey has the motion. But
maybe changing. In the meantime, we'll ask Councillor Duff to second the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. There has been much discussion and consultation about Blairgowrie Recreation Centre and its facilities since it was announced, and agreed changes to the design specification, mainly in terms of the internal floor space, have resulted in increased project costs from that shown by the initial feasibility study. In our further consideration of this project, there is an opportunity to reconfirm our climate change action plan principles by developing the recreation centre to passive house standards. This will significantly lower energy consumption and costs, reduce the carbon emissions by over 73% in year 1 and 52% over the 40-year life cycle, and save the council an estimated £7 million at present day figures, retrofitting the building for the 2045 net zero emissions target at some point in the future. Deputy Provost, the Recreation Centre project is keenly awaited by the communities of Blairgowrie and Rattray and by the wider and growing community in the area. Although not part of our discussions today, I'm pleased that we have also committed £500,000 towards the provision of a 3G pitch in Rattray's Davy Park, and was delighted to hear of progress in bringing the 3G project forward as part of a pioneering partnership with the community, sports clubs, the SFA and other partners. Deputy Provost, the motion before us today will be greatly welcomed by the whole of East Perthshire, and I'm pleased to second that motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any amendments or comments on this section of the report, please? Councillor Barnacle.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'd just like to say that one of the things that's impressed me about at least 3 of the 5 papers that we've been discussing in this background information is the commitment to the passive house construction methods and the far-sighted way in which the council is looking at, whilst incurring additional costs to actually deliver that, we're making energy savings over the years ahead. Far-sighted move, and I congratulate the council on doing that. I just wanted to say that, and obviously I am in support of the motion.
Thank you very much for your very supportive words, Councillor Barnacle. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. Provost, as a Blairgowrie boy, you will remember when the current Blairgowrie Rattray Centre was all shiny and new. This report from officers makes it clear that a replacement is now essential, and the passive house design model that is suggested is, in my view, essential in this time of climate emergency and a prudent approach to infrastructure building with reduced running costs. The community of Blairgowrie and the surrounding areas have been fully engaged when asking them for their input into this project and informed the council on the community requirements and design of the centre. There have been many meetings with the community, some heated, but all passionate about the new rec centre and it being built to meet community need and to a high standard. And that is perfectly reflected in the position I represented when I put a petition to the leader of the council back in 2018 when the budget for this was revised downwards. I therefore asked the leader of the council if he would incorporate an additional point to his paper, which I think augments item 3 on his list, and I will put this into the chat function and then read it out because it just augments what they said. The officers progressed the design of the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre in line with its use as the Blairgowrie High School PE department and the needs of the community of Blairgowrie and the surrounding area as expressed by the user reference group, because I feel that the user reference group involvement in this process is ultimately important and should be mentioned in the motion that the council passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shires.
I absolutely agree with Councillor McEwen's comments there. The user reference group, we met with officers on Monday evening, and you know, thanks to the officers who were there, who did an extremely good job of talking everyone through this stage and then the future steps. This is a very significant project for Blairgowrie, but not just for Blairgowrie and Rattray. It's for the whole of East Perthshire, because they all look to this facility for sport and leisure opportunities, and for the PE facilities for the high school. By moving to the passive house standards, we're committing to build a high quality, environmentally sustainable facility for the future, and I think we must be among the first in the UK to move to this. That gives me great pleasure, having been lobbied extensively by pupils at the high school from primary 7 who are now S1s, arguing that we as elected members should be very much putting our money where our mouth is and delivering for their futures, and I think it's fantastic that we are all able to give that commitment to those youngsters today. We're all really keen to see this project just get on now, and very much look forward to playing my part in that, along with other elected members for Blairgowrie and Glens, for Strathmore and for Strathty. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Braun.
Thank you, David Provost. Just going to echo everybody what everyone else has said, but as I understand, the plans for this new recreation centre date back to 2014. Today, we are able to progress this project by committing the capital to do so. There have been many delays. However, these delays have not been in vain, as we now have before us a modern, energy-efficient facility which will serve Blairgowrie High School, various user groups and residents of the town for decades to come. Whilst it will require more capital funding than planned, it will be built to a design that will satisfy future building standards on energy savings and therefore require no further upgrade. That energy efficiency will bring revenue savings from the moment it opens. Provost, this will be a modern, state-of-the-art recreation centre available to all, but which nonetheless will play its part in mitigating climate change. It will also form an important piece of new infrastructure for a town growing under much change, going under much change as a result of house building. I would like to say two things before I finish. Firstly, I would like to thank all the officers involved in this project for their time and work, particularly in the last few months under what have been very difficult conditions. And secondly, I would like to thank all the user groups and residents of Blairgowrie who, while, as we've heard, have been very vocal in their concerns about the project and its delays, but have shown great patience on this project. They have placed their trust and faith in the ward councillors and the council, and hopefully we can now fulfil that commitment, and in doing so reward their trust and faith. A meeting on Monday night of the various user groups indicated that much preparatory work is still to be done, but that we are still on target for a 2023 completion. So I am happy to support this motion and would do so in addition to Councillor McEwen's comments. I think they should be added as well. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I did have concerns about what I thought was the ambiguous wording of paragraph 3 of the original motion and the hostages to fortune that might create, but I think that's addressed by Councillor McEwen's suggested changes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lane.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. This has indeed been a long-awaited project. The people of Blairgowrie have been, it's been a cocky project in my view, but the money's been there, the money's been reduced, the money's going back up again. So hopefully now that we do not let them down again, we move forward and provide a facility that's not just an educational facility, as though that's what it'll be badged under, but we should be getting as many usages as possible. And we have to listen to what the community want. The community have been waiting a heck of a long time to get this finalised, and the money's been there before and taken away. So I just hope that we do not let the community down in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Simpson, I missed you out. Councillor Simpson.
Sorry, you've had a trying day, Deputy Provost. You have my sympathy. I don't want to speak too soon, but it does seem that at last we have a project where there is unanimity across the council, and we can all agree that this is a project that Eastern Perthshire is crying out for and now is going to get. I didn't wish also to miss the opportunity to remind colleagues that we wouldn't need to worry about the 8.9 million shortfall if we were to take my advice and abandon the Crosstay Link Road.
Thank you very much for these comments, Councillor Simpson. We're not forgetting. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. It was really just very briefly to echo what Councillor Shar said, that everybody has recognised that the upgrade or a new facility is desperately needed, and to echo as well the comments from various councillors about the efforts that officers have put in engaging the user reference group, but to echo in particular Councillor Shar's comment about the wider usage of the centre by not just Blairgowrie and Rattray residents, but also the Strathty and Strathmore, the wider Eastern Perthshire area. It is a facility which is widely used, and it will be very welcome that the facility is getting updated. Regarding Councillor Duff's seconding of the motion, he did reference the 3G pitch in the Davy Park area, and I'm very pleased to see that that's actually, rather than being a council project, it's a community-led project to which we're making a capital grant rather than running the project ourselves. Through discussions I've had with the head of legal and governance services and through her to the head of finance, although that is in the phasing of the capital budget in one of the appendices we looked at earlier, in 4 or 5 years' time, there is no objection to bringing that forward. So hopefully that project can get handed over and ready to start very quickly, and that will provide an additional sporting facility while the work on Blairgowrie Recreation Centre is ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anybody wishing to make any more comment. Before asking Councillor Lyle to sum up, I need to ask him if he's willing to incorporate the words that Councillor Tom McEwen suggested.
Thank you very much again, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted, and I am aware, because I've had some contact with the user reference group and some of the chairmen of local chairpersons of local community groups in Blairgowrie. So I think it's absolutely appropriate that we incorporate the wording from Councillor McEwen in item 3 in the motion. And I'd just like to thank all the councillors for their contributions. And this is really, hopefully, as I say, a significant moment in progress, and that Councillor Lane won't be able to be disappointed in the future. But I think it's appropriate anyway that we send this off now and get on with it and get it built as quick as possible, and hopefully it will be better than ever had been proposed previously.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Lyle. So I take it from that this is agreed unanimously by the council, and we just want to get it done as they see. So thank you very much.
Agreed.
Okay,
Agreed.
Good. We now move on to paper 7. Another very important paper, Balhousie North Muirton Primary School project. So can I ask if there are any questions on this report?
Deputy Chief Executive, I've actually got this as motion 6.
Yes, it is. Sorry, it is motion 6. It is 6. Sorry.
Yep.
I don't see any questions in the box yet. No one got any questions? Okay, there are no questions. I shall ask Councillor Lyle to move this part of the report.
Thank you again, Deputy Provost, and thank you to the officers for all their work in bringing this report forward today. And I shall be brief. In relation to North Muirton and Balhousie Primary School replacement, we currently have an agreed budget of 16 million, and for the reasons which I've already stated in respect of the other projects, I believe that we should progress this with a passive house design, and I think this will be an excellent new build primary school. So therefore I'm happy to move that 1, the council proceeds with the project on the basis of a passive house option at a cost of 16.4 million. Notes that the passive house option may present an opportunity to seek external funding and asks officers to submit a bid to the Learning Estate Improvement Programme for this project. And thirdly, asks officers to identify possible funding options to identify the £0.4 million shortfall as part of the 21-22 budget. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. A question from Councillor Sarwar has just appeared in my chat box just now. So before I ask Councillor Duff to second it, Councillor Sarwar, will let you ask your question.
Thank you, that's very kind. I was going to try and incorporate it into a comment if I wasn't given the opportunity, but from my research, I think that we would be the first local authority in Scotland to be building a primary school to passive house standards. Is that correct?
Crawford, I would imagine, or Greg.
Yes, Councillor Sarwar, I think that could be right. There's minimal, maybe one or two in the whole of UK, but I don't know if Stephen is still on the call. He could probably clarify that.
I believe there's one in the north of Scotland, a very small one. Sorry,
I think that's a nursery, is it not? On the university campus?
No, I think it's in Highland Council.
Okay.
But certainly there's no big two-stream primary schools or no secondary schools that have been constructed or are in construction. So we will be one of the first in Scotland to bring these forward and hopefully complete.
Deputy Provost, if I may speak, please.
Yes,
Councillors, I sit on the Learning Estate Improvement Board, and I am aware that there are other projects that are considering passive house standards. As Stephen Crawford has rightly pointed out, there is also a school in Wick that I believe has been built to passive house standards. So I think whilst our aspirations are laudable to claim first in passive house standards, I think we need to be careful about that. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Duff, we'll go back to you for you to second the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. The replacement primary school for North Muirton Balhousie is a further opportunity for this council to support its climate change principles. An additional budget of £400,000 now will allow for a passive house design school and open up the opportunities for Learning Estate Investment Programme funding, similar to Perth High School. I'm sure that members will see the many advantages of the proposals contained in the motion, which I now have much pleasure in seconding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we go on to comments. Councillor Rebecca.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. We're very supportive now in the SNP group of this project. 2.5 years ago, we did seek to keep both communities with their own schools, but we are where we are, and 2.5 years on, it's encouraging to see the parent cohort and the school community broader work together for a new merged school. So I think we're very supportive of this. I'm delighted, again, without trying to repeat what's been said too often about the passive house method of building this school. I think it would probably be fair to say that we are amongst the first, shall we say, in Scotland to build a primary school. I know Edinburgh Council have got plans to build secondary schools to the passive house agenda, and there's the nursery in Aberdeen as well as the primary school in Wick. But I think we shouldn't make any apologies for trying to be progressive, and I think we will be amongst the first. So we're very supportive now of this project, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm particularly pleased to hear those comments, Councillor Rebecca, because I think this project will succeed if we're all pulling the same way to work with the communities there to make it happen. I'm absolutely delighted that we're in this position to bring this forward and support the investment in the children and the communities of Balhousie and North Muirton. Anyone who's visited either of the current buildings will know that this investment is urgently needed, and if it wasn't that the Blairgowrie Rec was also sitting in this, you know, this batch of projects, I would say this was, you know, I really want us to get on with this one, and I know officers will do everything they can to pull out all the stops to make this, you know, happen as quickly as possible. I attended the drop-in session at North Muirton just before lockdown, and the excitement of the children that were there with their mums and dads and grannies to have a look at the plans was fantastic to see and hear. Today we can get on with this investment and allow the fantastic staff in both schools to move forward to start the work of forging that new identity for the new school, which the children of North West Perth and their families at the very heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ahern.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief and echo comments that have already been made about the school. The school's in my ward and I'm very much in favour of the new school. It'll replace two that are either not fit for purpose or a desperate need of updating. This school will be yet another building that will meet the Passive House standard and will put Perth Kinross out there in terms of its commitment to the green agenda, and will be another school to provide a better educational environment for our young people and further enhance this administration's commitment to education and our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost. I want to associate the Lib Dem group with the comments that have been made regarding our enthusiasm for the Passive House standard and the action that the Council is taking to tackle the climate emergency and climate change within our school estate. I hope that we can get equal cross-party backing for the support and financial support from the Scottish Government through the Scottish Futures Trust for the investment, the additional investment that we're making within our school estate, and that the goalposts don't move with the same sort of frequency and regularity as they did when we were trying to meet the criteria for the try schools and buy schools, and we really do need to secure the investment from the Scottish Futures Trust, so that, you know, our aspirations to deliver energy neutral schools is matched by national funding too.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barrett. I don't see any other. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Really, just to reiterate what I said earlier about Perth High School in relation to incorporating lessons learned from the current coronavirus pandemic that we're all living through, both in relation to technology enablement and readiness for the future. So I'd like to see the same standards applied to all of our schools.
Thank you very much for these comments. I'm sure they will be noted and taken forward. Thank you. I don't see any other members wishing to make comment, and there is no amendment, so I take it we are happy to agree this report and just want to see this project moving forward for the good of all the children in that area. So happy to agree this report.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you all very much. Now we come to the final report of the day. This is the recommendations for the PH2O. Are there any questions before we proceed? Any questions on this report? Just give a second or two, because sometimes it's a bit slower. No questions, so I shall invite Councillor Lyle to move this part of the report, please.
Okay. Again, thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barnacle's got a question in. Councillor Barnacle.
Not really a question, Deputy Provost. I don't have this paper for some reason. But I'll listen to the debate. And
it was all part of the big paper. It's not a separate item. It's all part of the capital. And
okay.
It's the last part of the paper. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Lyle.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Provost, and hopefully it will become clear to Councillor Barnacle as I go through this. Across the Chamber, we have long been committed in principle to the Perth Leisure vision of the PH2O project. The budget was allocated for work to be undertaken in terms of feasibility, and I appreciate that a significant amount of work has been done by officers both in the Council and in Live Active Leisure, in terms of developing the scope of the project, and we are grateful to the work that is done by them to date. The damage caused by the recent storm to the current leisure pool, in my opinion, further underlines the need and the importance of this project going forward. At our budget meeting in March of this year, it was agreed that work be undertaken by officers to identify a potential commercial income stream to support a funding solution for the Perth Leisure Vision PH2O proposal. Shortly afterwards, as we all know, resources were deployed to managing the impact of COVID-19 and to ensuring the ongoing provision of critical services, and consequently this work has been delayed. Given the wider impact of the pandemic in terms of the economy and our day-to-day living and working, it would also be fair to assume that the potential options for securing a commercial income stream may now have changed or in fact be limited in the current COVID climate. Whilst I appreciate the funding challenge that this project will present, I firmly believe it should still be a priority in terms of our future investment blueprint, a symbol of our recovery, a symbol of renewal in these challenging times, and I hope that you will all be able to support me with this. I therefore move that the Council restates its commitment to developing the PH2O proposal, notes that officers have been unable to proceed with identifying a commercial income stream to support an appropriate funding solution, and asks officers to continue to identify any potential commercial income or other income streams and to identify possible funding solutions to enable this important project to be considered as part of the 21-22 capital budget. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Duff, I ask you to second the report.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. You'll be glad to hear that it's been a long day, and I'm happy simply to second the motion.
Thank you very much for your few words, much appreciated. Are there any amendments, if not, or comments on this report? Councillor Lane, you have an amendment?
I do indeed. Thank you, Deputy Provost, and we'll have that put up on the screen, please.
Thank you.
I missed it.
Disappeared. I'm sure it'll come back.
Okay, Provost, I'm happy to speak to it at the moment. It's basically that there it comes back again. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. It's really to, it beefs up what is said. We as an SNP group feel this is one of the most important projects that we've been talking about dither and delay. I've heard from various other groups. This is something where there has been dither and delay. We want officers to be required to bring back a feasible solution to bring forward the Live Active Leisure and PH2, working with Live Active Leisure to bring forward options for PH2 to the budget during the budget setting process, and we want them to this to be highlighted in their work moving forward. I know that there's been a lot of officer time used elsewhere, but we feel now is the time to push PH2 forward. It is one of the most important projects for all of the people in Perth, not just for people, tourists that come in, but for the local people who will use it, and all the benefits of alleviating mental health problems, etc. So I'll not take any more of your time, but this is the SNP amendment to the paper.
Thank you very much. Councillor Parrott, I believe you're going to second the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I won't take very long, and I accept entirely that the Leader of the Council has gone beyond what is stated in the papers with regards to support for this project. But I still think that our amendment gives this project the urgency and dare I say pace that it requires. I believe this project is the single most important project beyond the 5 that we are attending to today, and I think it needs our amendment gives urgency and pace to this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Apologies, Deputy Provost, I wasn't expecting you to come to me quite so soon. Thank you for letting me in. Yeah, PH2O is for me an extremely important project for Perth and Kinross. The SNP group enthusiastically backs this key development. Not only does it make financial sense, both in terms of reducing the currently very high operating and maintenance costs, and also in attracting repeat visitors to Perth from the wider region, it is, I would argue, an essential development from the perspective of improving the health and well-being of our citizens of all ages. As Chair of Perth and Kinross Integration Joint Board, and with core responsibilities for safeguarding and improving both the physical and mental health of all, I strongly urge Council to accelerate plans for this project now, rather than leaving it to another day. If the SNP were in administration, I think we would have been moving this forward with greater urgency, and I urge the Council to back this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barrett, you're requesting a recess.
Yeah, well, just following the process that we've established previously, and given the fact that we didn't manage to adhere to 10 minutes last time, I thought we may as well just go for the full 20, Provost, Deputy Provost.
I don't know if we'd actually need as long as 20 minutes, but 15-minute recess I'm willing to give at this stage in the day. I think people are, and I will stick strictly to the 15 minutes.
Thank you. Happy to agree.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Deputy Provost, is that 25 past or 30 minutes past?
Well, my clock says it's 16:12 at the moment. So if I was giving you 15, I mean 16:18, I would be, but I will say 20 past. Sorry, Councillor Drysdale's got a point of order. Councillor Drysdale, can I find out what your point of order is?
Yeah, I was going to withdraw. I just wondered, Deputy Provost, whether it might have been, given where we are, you know, whether we could have heard the remaining comments before going into recess. It's up to yourself, obviously.
Well, if it would be helpful to speed the process up, we could hear the comments that are there just now.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Anderson.
Deputy Provost, I think you've missed me out, if you don't mind me saying.
Sorry. My brain's maybe.
It's been a long day, don't worry. Can I clarify? Sorry, Deputy Provost. Can I clarify as well, as a board member of LAL, whether I'm allowed to comment on this amendment? I'm not quite sure. I did declare an interest.
I would ask Lisa.
Yep.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks very much. I do believe that the health and well-being of all our communities in Perth and Kinross will be key post-COVID. For some people that will mean culture, For other people, it'll mean socialising, drinking wine and eating crisps. For other people, maybe that's just me, of course, but for most people, it will mean sport and recreation, and some or all of the above. PH2O will be absolutely essential to the health and well-being of the people of Perth and Kinross and beyond post-COVID. So in short, it's time to be brave. PH2O needs to happen, and it needs to happen as quick as possible. Thanks, Deputy Provost.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I've not got my camera on. Does it matter? Yes, I fully support the amendment. Yes, this needs to get a very high priority. Health and well-being and sport and recreation go hand in hand. So we definitely need to push on with PH2O, get it up and running. We need to be brave about that. I know that the people on the street feel that we should have a modern, well-designed development in Perth that will attract them. Many people have said to me in Amund and Erne and Perth that you know that the pool and the rink, leisure pool and the rink, are getting a wee bit long in the tooth, in fact very long in the tooth, and this needs to be addressed. So I would support the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor McCall.
I'm happy to reserve my comments until after recess.
Okay,
I think we should
thank
just
you.
let people break and get on with the discussions they need to have, and then we can come back.
Councillor Barnacle, do you wish to speak now? I'm being very lenient, but I don't know why at this stage of the day.
I'll be very brief. I don't understand why we're having a recess. To me, the SNP amendment just beefs up Murray Lyle's motion, and I would have thought he would have been quite happy with that. I certainly am.
Thank you. Okay, right, we shall have this recess to please some members, some groups, because it's only been fair. So we will resume again at 4:30. 16:30. Thank you.
That was
John Rebick, will you continue to sing in the open?
It's almost 4:30. If everybody is back. Are we ready to commence?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's
then.
crack on.
Right, thank you very much, councillors. Right, we'll go back to the comments, unless we have another amendment from anyone else. No. So, Councillor McCall, you were next with your comment.
If it's all the same to you, Deputy Provost, I'd quite like to save my comment until later on, until we hear what the other groups are planning to do with this amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Right, I don't see anyone else with a comment. Oh, Councillor Barrett.
I'm happy to let Councillor McCall go first, thank you.
Okay. This is very interesting. Anyone else like to make a comment just now, or are we? Because at the moment, that's the only two comments I see in the chat box, unless they were way up at the top, which are out of my sight.
Deputy Provost, I wonder, in view of the time and the hour and the length of time we've spent on this, it would be in order for me to move a motion that the question now be put.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. It's a long time since I've heard that being asked. Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. Well, if there are no further comments, I will now ask Councillor Lyle to sum up. Thank you.
I didn't say I didn't want to comment. I just said I prefer to make my comment later. So I think I'm not quite sure what that proposal is for. I mean, are you trying to shut down the debate?
If I'm right, I think when Councillor Wilson asked that question, that means we've come to the end of the debate and we would now we'd go to the vote. If my memory serves me right. But I think Lisa maybe wants to make
no way.
Lisa?
Deputy Provost, you have asked if there was anyone who indicated that they wished to comment. You invited Councillor McCall to comment. If Councillor McCall isn't prepared to comment and there are no further comments in the chat, no further requests in the chat, then we can't sit around doing nothing, and therefore in the absence of anybody wishing to add further comment, it's appropriate for you to ask Councillor Lyle to then sum up and move to a vote.
Well, I'm happy to make my comment now if that's the case, if that's the end of it.
And I'll happily comment after Councillor McCall, which is the order in which we put forward our requests to comment. We don't get to pick and choose when we speak.
Councillors, this has been a long day for everyone, so I just appreciate if you could just try and continue and be nice to each other. Right, Councillor McCall, this is your last chance. Do you wish to make a comment?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, I will comment. And I'm rather disappointed by Councillor Barrett's puerile behaviour in this instance. However, I will comment because, and the reason, just so to explain it, the reason I wanted to wait towards the end is because I'm the ward councillor and I felt it was appropriate that there was at least one ward councillor in this council who supports this project getting off the ground and moving far more quickly than it currently is. So, as I mentioned, Perth and Kinross, the Perth Leisure Pool and the Dewar Centre are in my ward. They're well known and well loved and well used by the constituents, but also for the whole of Perth and Kinross. In addition, over the years, both venues have welcomed visitors for leisure purposes, professional sports tournaments, and for conferences, bringing tourism and income to Perth and Kinross. All of the things that previous motions have sought to improve. Not in this particular paper, but on things like the Perth City Hall, and that everybody says is so important. But yet somehow for this particular project, it doesn't seem to matter very much. And more recently, which I think is equally important, is that Perth Leisure Pool has been offering prescribed wellbeing services to our constituents across Perth and Kinross, and I think that has to continue. However, both local facilities are aging and increasingly require disproportionate maintenance. Maintenance costs just to stand still. And then many of the features are dated, and our customers these days want something a little bit more modern, a bit more contemporary.
If you want
Sorry, is there somebody not on mute? All of this means that some of our customers are turning, including the ones that come from outside of Perth and Perth Kinross, are turning elsewhere, and it will be increasingly to other facilities, and it will be increasingly difficult to get those ones back. The previous SNP administration recognised the importance of this PH2O project and made provision for it for its delivery, something that unfortunately the current administration, aided and abetted by its Lib Dem colleagues when they were in coalition together, they failed to recognise. And although there's warm words from the leader of the council to say that they're committed to this project, there's nothing in the motion put forward that really shows a real commitment to this. So we find ourselves in protracted and vague processes to determine the future of this project, but nothing actually gets done. There is an urgent need to define this project, identify the budget, and establish a realistic and achievable project plan, complete with key milestones, and bring that detail forward to the budget process for 2021 to 22. And finally, I would just like to say that I'm really disappointed that for many people in this chamber, this seems to be a party lines issue. This is a health and well-being facility for all of the people in Perth and Kinross. And if some of my fellow councillors cannot see that, then I actually despair. And I think that if we don't support this amendment, then we're all not supporting the people of Perth and Kinross. Thank you, Deputy Provost, for your consideration in this.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Deputy Provost, and thanks for the opportunity for our group to consider both the motion and the amendment. I am disappointed by Councillor McCall's remarks when I was only affording her the courtesy of speaking, but given what she's just said, it's very clear why she wanted to try and have the last word and go unchallenged. My group are very keen to support the motion submitted by the leader of the council. We feel that the SNP amendment is simply an amendment purely for amendment's sake. It is something drawn from the magic wand and empty gesture school of politics, and it sits in stark contrast to their lack of grip and drive with regards to PH2O when they were in administration. So we're very happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Councillor Simpson, you have a point of order.
Thank you, Deputy. It may be a little late, but as I see it, point of order number 17 states quite clearly that the convener's ruling shall be final and shall not be open to discussion. And I wondered if that particular point of order and that particular thing has been suspended for this meeting or not.
I note your comments, Councillor Simpson, and very well made. And I also see in the chat box we now have lots of comments. When I did ask for them, I didn't get any. And now we seem to have quite a few, which I find quite strange that suddenly after 4 or 5 minutes we can get more comments. So unless somebody's got anything else to say, I'm not keen to take them because I don't know if it's going to make any difference to the debate. Has anyone got anything that they really... If I take one, I have to take them all. So Councillor Donaldson.
Where's that?
I actually put in my comment a little while back, actually, and in part that is the question of how we're going to take this. But I just want to say I entirely support my group's amendment. I'm not going to get into all the, this being an amendment for amendment's sake. What it's trying to get over clearly is in this project we need to proceed at pace. We need greater urgency and greater focus. And I think with the BRG process that's coming up, I actually think it's such a major project that then a lot of other items in the BRG flow out of, so to speak, out of what happens with PH2O. I think we want to look back to 40 years ago, thereabouts, when the existing facility was set up, and it was a major success. I think we want to possibly look at the funding options at that time. I think they're maybe too negative on the funding options, that there's major energy savings to be made here with modern design, and that can support quite a high level of capital investment and of borrowing. There's potential external funders, but the key thing here is that this is a project that certainly people, not just of Perth City, but Perth and Kinross, can benefit from in terms of health and well-being. So the real point is we want its urgency is to try to progress and push this forward as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I made a point of order about 10 minutes ago, and I just wanted to say that I'm incredibly disappointed with the total abandonment of standing orders, even when people have made, and I'm not directing this towards you, Deputy Provost. You have done an incredibly good job in very difficult circumstances. I'm very disappointed that members do seem to have totally abandoned standing orders and decorum towards fellow elected members with regards to their comments, and I think we're all better than this, and I would just encourage everyone to please raise the tone of debate. I mean, we're nearly at the end of the day, and I think it's pretty poor showing, and it was asked earlier that members should reference the standing order that they are using when they're making points of order, so if they could please do so. I'm referring to the Standing Order 17, where the convener gets to preserve order, and Standing Order 22, Standing Order 21, where the convener's decision is final. So thank you, Deputy Convener, Deputy Provost, for your work this afternoon. It has been incredibly hard work.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robertson.
That was a tired voice there.
It is a tired voice, let me tell you.
Again, I wasn't actually going to comment on this, but I thought, unfortunately, it was made into a political point by the SNP. Can I just say that it wasn't until the Lib Dem Conservative administration took over the actual money was spent. Actual money was spent on bringing this project forward. All up to that time, it was just good words, but no actual action. So I think that that former administration has got a lot to be proud of in moving this forward. And I think we should all just do our best to try and support PH2O. I know it's a Perth project, but it's a thing, as someone said, that is important for the whole of Perth and Kinross. So I support the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Deputy Provost, and I'll be mercifully brief. I wasn't going to comment, but I think Councillor McCall said she wanted to make sure there was a representation from the ward, and as one of the other local ward members, I'm more than happy to comment. Councillor Donaldson spoke about 40 years ago. Well, I've got to put my hand up and confess to have been around at that time and been responsible for the decision that made the leisure pool a reality at the time, and it was a great achievement. But time moves on. We need to refurbish. I don't think the amendment adds any real value to the thing. I think it's unfair to ask the officers to take one particular project and then more or less demand that it be taken at pace or quickly. There's an enormous amount of pressure on our officers at the moment, and I don't want to see that added to it any more than's absolutely necessary. We don't know what's round the corner in terms of what other difficulties fall us. We've had COVID, we've had flooding, we've had nearly everything you could imagine. It's a perfect storm in some ways, and let's show some compassion and thought for the very heavy workload that we've got to undertake as well, but the officers have got to undertake. And I'm happy to go with the motion because I think that will achieve whatever we all want to achieve, and that's to get a viable scheme for PH2 to be able to take off. Thank you.
Thank you. So with the last comment from Councillor Sarwar, because as I said before, 15 minutes ago, nobody wanted to speak. So this is the last comment. Thank you. Councillor Sarwar.
Yeah, and I'll be brief, but I feel I have to respond to this negative connotation of politics. We are here today as politicians. We're here to offer strategic direction, and I think it's really important that we remember that budgets are about the well-being of our residents and constituents that vote for us, and we're just saying that this is a project that needs to be prioritised, and we do need to have firm action on it.
Thank you very much. I will now invite Councillor Lyle to sum up, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I somehow get the feeling that the amendment, or those supporting the amendment, haven't read the motion. There is not a significant amount of difference between the amendment. The motion does indicate there is an element of urgency around the PH2O project, but there is also an element of realism. Beyond the 5 capital projects that we discussed earlier today, this is the next priority, and I think that was made clear in the motion. I'd also, because of the COVID pandemic, there is no doubt officers have not been able to put the resource into this one particular project that they'd wanted to, and it is critical, I think, to the success of the project going forward, that any potential commercial income streams or other income streams are identified at early course to help provide a financial footing for this, where the costs do not run away with the council going forward, as it's the same with the other projects in the City Hall, etc., that we agreed today. So I'm slightly disappointed in the SNP's amendment, in that everybody who's spoken to the amendment has really pretty much said what was in the motion. So with that, I'll stop now for fear of saying any more, and just hope you will support the motion.
Thank you very much. So Scott, we will now go to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillors, we're dealing again with item 5 on the agenda, and this time we're dealing with specifically recommendation 9 in the report regarding the PH2O project. We have a motion by Councillor Lyle, seconded by Councillor Duff, the terms of which were shared on the screen and also posted to you in the chat. We have an amendment by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Parrott, again the terms of which were shared with you and posted in the chat as well. Can I ask members to confirm when I read out their name if they're voting for the motion or the amendment? Councillor Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Baird.
Motion.
Councillor Barnacle.
Amendment.
Councillor Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Brock.
Amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Brock.
Amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Brock. Councillor Audrey Coates. Councillor Coates.
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis.
Motion.
Councillor Lang.
Amendment.
Councillor Lyle.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor McDade.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Parrott.
Amendment.
Councillor Pover.
Amendment.
Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Amendment.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Sarwar.
Amendment.
Councillor Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Simpson.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
Councillor Williamson.
Amendment.
And Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Deputy Provost, I have 20 votes for the motion and 17 votes for the amendment, so the motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, councillors, and I'd like to thank all the officers today who have brought all these papers. It's been a long day for everyone, and we've got good results at the end of the day. And I just need to remind you that we meet all again next week at the same time. But I think the Provost wants to say a few words at the end, so I hand back to the Provost. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm certainly not going to say too much. I just wanted to thank you personally, Deputy Provost, for a job well done today. I would also like to extend our thanks to the officers for a long day. I know they're very busy, but to make sure that everything was in place to help all our councillors. It's been a good-natured council meeting, apart from the last bit, and I'd like to see more of the good-natured council meeting, because we all got on extremely well, and we really now have to try and keep that going. Everything's been said about the what's been happening, and the CTLR and the City Hall and everything, and it's all positive, and I'm looking forward to the future. I really do think this council now has been very far-sighted and looking forward to the future, which puts this council, I think, very much in the limelight throughout Scotland. I'm absolutely delighted with that. So have a good evening and have a rest tonight.
Just before you go, the mention about next week's papers, the papers should normally be published by today, but I'm sure you appreciate the officers have been very busy preparing for today and next week, so the papers will not be issued today, so you'll probably get them tomorrow, but they're certainly working on them, so please give the officers a bit of leeway. So thank you very much.